because it's supposed to start at 10:30, and then eventually they show up. So we'll do the same thing here. Oh, unless you are like Ms. Valerie and you came to the wrong place, I hope you're in the right plot, right? Welcome even if you're not.
Thank you.
This is Transforming Leaders. My name is Kelly Legg. Let me give you a little information for why I am the person standing up here and you respect listening to. Kelly Legg, I am a senior pastor of West Shore Baptist Church, which is in Camp Hill, so just on the other side of the river from Harrisburg. Been there a whopping 3 months. You gotta like it. So still in the honeymoon stage. They still think they like me. It's great. Before this, I was 9 years at Norristown, First Baptist Norristown, which is just outside of Philadelphia. And the short answer to why I'm up here speaking is that Mark asked me to do things and I say yes. And that's pretty much all that one boils down to. But when Pastor Mark called a couple months ago and he said, hey, we're going to do the Biennial, and we're basing it off of Todd Bolsinger's book, right? Canoeing the Mountains. How many of you have read it? Yes. Okay, making progress. The first session, not a soul. So we had to do some background work. And he said, we're going to do Canoeing the Mountains. And since you have read it, you know it is about leading your churches, not really at the edge, but off the edge, right? Going off the map in the directions that God's taking us right now. And he said, hey, when you went to Norristown, you got to do a lot of that. And that's true. When I came to First Baptist Norristown, they had done the math. And they said, we can keep our doors open for 4 years. At the end of that, we will have no money, and we fully intend to close the doors. That was 9 years ago. So we beat that. We came and we saw God do really awesome things. Right? We saw the church, we multiplied, we doubled in attendance. Our budget doubled. We stopped having every year be in the red, and we actually got to see what black looks like. It was kind of nice. We started engaging in some amazing mission and ministry outreaches within our community, across the globe, as a matter of fact. We got to watch God do some really awesome things. You know what else I got to watch? Conflict. Right? Because as we started to bring transformation in the church, even as at the same time people were going, we're pretty sure this is good. The same people at the same time were going, oh my gosh, this is different. And we began to experience some tensions and some conflicts. And so that's why Pastor Mark called. Really what he said was, you walked through a lot of conflict. True story. And part of what I'm hoping we can do is have a conversation here today about what it looks like to lead our churches, to lead in a way that transforms. And transformational leadership will cause conflict. Period. It's supposed to, because that means we're changing the status quo. But what we're going to have is a conversation around what does it look like to lead through that conflict. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to give you some background, kind of introductory stuff. We're going to walk through 3 points, really just only 3, and no poem. And then we will have a chance to workshop and to talk about what those points look like in your ministry context. Clear as enough? Good, let's get going. So if you read Bolsinger's book, you're very familiar with this map and this concept, but let me just remind you of the analogy that Bolsinger was using as he talked through Canoeing the Mountains. So he talks about Lewis and Clark, right? Who started their journey right around that St. Louis area. And they were given a commission by Thomas Jefferson to find the Northwest Passage, make their way to the Pacific Ocean. So yesterday, Pastor Jeff talked to us. I'm sorry, I don't have the nice outfit that he had. But he talked to us about some of the ways that they adopted and adapted and prepared to be able to go on this trip as best as they could with their knowledge of what was on the map, right? So they hopped in some canoes, and this red line, you can't see it, but underneath the red, that's all rivers, right? They got in and they canoed their way up to that big X. Anybody know what the X was? The Lemmy Pass, right? And they get to the Lemmy Pass. And as you read their journals, they pick up their canoes and they figure, all right, we're going to climb to the top of this thing. And I'm not sure if they were picturing like maybe the flume ride at Six Flags or something. You know, they thought, we're going to get to the top of this, and there's going to be this river that's going to take us back down that mountain, and we're just going to coast all the way to the Pacific. And they got to the Lemmy Pass, and what did they find instead?
The Rocky Mountains.
The Rocky mountains. The number one place you probably don't want to try to canoe. Right? So they get there and they realize what got us here, right? What got us to the Lemmy Pass was really good, it was very effective, but it is not going to get us there. It is not going to get us all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And Bolsinger talks about that they had to make a choice. Now, they could say at that point, we are wedded to the canoe. And if they really wanted to, they could try to schlep that bad boy all the way to the Pacific. And I think we'd be having a different conversation today, right? We would be talking about the Discovery team that died. They said we're not about canoes. We're about finding the Pacific, right? So as Bolsinger unpacks this analogy, he talks about the reality that in order to gain passage to the Pacific, they had to lose. They had to lose the canoes. They had to lose their plan. They had to lose feeling competent because they were headed into uncharted territories to go on a terrain they've never been on. Now, Bolsinger takes that image, right, and he says, well, let's apply it to today. Let's apply it to the church. Because right now, we live in a very different culture than we have ever experienced before. Now, we've got our own Lemmy Pass in North America, especially in evangelical churches. And we're starting from the premise, right? Our conversation today, we're starting from the premise that what got us here is not going to get us there because the world looks so different. And you don't even need to look at the whole world. All of North America. Just look at the community your church is in. It is so different from where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. What got us here is not going to get us there. So I want to ask you a question. And I tell my congregation that if I ask a question, it's not rhetorical, right? If you want lunch, you have to answer it. So in your case, if you want a break, you got to answer, right? Live and in color would be very helpful. I want you to think about your church, not make-believe church, not First Friendly on the Hill or whatever we talked about last night, but your specific church. What in your church, what programs, what methods worked? And what worked really, really well in the past? Because we've been given an amazing commission by someone much bigger than Thomas Jefferson, right? This great commission to be engaging our communities with the gospel, to see as many people as possible come to know Jesus Christ, right? And my guess is your church has been doing that, or you would no longer have a church, right? In the last 10, 20, 30, 50 years, the church has been trying to live the Great Commission. And there have been things that your church has done, and they worked. They worked really well. But they might not work now. So what were the things that in the past, in your church, in your context, they worked? They got you here. Go for it.
Sunday school.
Sunday school. Why did Sunday school work in the past? What was it?
I wasn't there, but they had hundreds of people in Sunday school back in the day at my church, literally.
Of all ages?
They had hundreds of adults too, so they were doing something right then, but it was working. People came to it.
Yeah.
It was a Sunday, actually it was Sunday afternoon Sunday school.
Okay.
So like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday.
Okay.
But
It is Sunday school, and it was packing people in.
But it ain't working anymore.
It ain't working anymore. What were you saying? Bus ministry. Okay. You used to go out into the community and just pick up the kids and bring them in? Cool. That's a lawsuit now.
Our Mansfield is near Mansfield University, and they had a vibrant music choir, bell choir, brass ensemble, people that came down from the college that filled up the church with music.
Cool. Is that still happening?
We still have bell choir, and we have a piano player from the
All right.
but it's small. It's much smaller than what they pack people in.
All right. So you have some college connections that were playing off of their musical strengths. Yes, ma'am.
Bible study.
Bibles. What do you mean by Bible study?
Bible study. And
Full agreement. And if we're talking about things that got us here, how many of your churches used to have a Sunday night or a Wednesday night service? Anybody still have one? Yeah, that's okay. Okay. Well, that's not supposed to be that. That's Wednesday. What else?
Vacation Bible school.
Oh, I was waiting. It was coming. So what was VBS? What did it used to look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was really, yeah, they came out like from all over the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Even some kids didn't go to church. Most of those kids did not go to church, but they went to Vacation Bible school.
So when in the past, VBS would pack it out, hundreds of kids, many of whom were unchurched.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feed them. Usually, if you feed them, they'll come.
Generally,
To be, but not.
but not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Anything
it was
else?
a daytime VBS. It was a daytime.
It was a daytime VBS versus the nighttime VBS. Yeah, that could be really different. Yes, sir.
Awana.
Alana came up in the last time too.
Yep. Huh?
What's a Awana?
Hey, you just answered that question really well. And you don't even know what it is, right?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
It's a kids program.
Wednesday night, but Bible, they learn Bible verses, they get
Yeah.
awards for learning Bible verses.
It was a youth program that was very regimented in how it was taught. Lots and lots and lots of
I
churches
guess
had
the
it. Used to
Bible
pack the
Girl
kids out.
Scouts and Boy Scouts.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, now I got it.
Christian Boy and Girl Scouts. That's a good depiction of a one.
Yeah.
These things were amazing, right? And we could keep adding to the list. The church I pastor right now, West Shore Baptist, we just celebrated our 60th anniversary. And last Saturday, they had their 60th celebration, and they had a letter written by the son of the first pastor. And in that letter, he had given us little snippets of his mom's Christmas letter. You know, back when these were a thing. And she had written every year in her Christmas letter some stats about the church, right? So she was like, first, because they planted. So she's the first year, there's 46 people, whatever. By year 3, there's 146 people in their Sunday school. Now, the church I pastor right now, if you drove past it in Camp Hill, you drive past original part of the building that used to be the sanctuary. And then we added on sanctuary fellowship hall. And then we added on this awesome 3-story education building, right? 3 stories of nothing but Sunday school classrooms. I have got at least 15 beautiful classrooms. Do you know how many we use on Sunday mornings for Sunday school?
2.
Dos. 2. Only 2. When we were having this conversation there Sunday night, or Saturday night, they were reading that there used to be 146 people. One of the senior saints who was sitting at the table with me turned around to me because it's only 60 years old, right? So he remembers those days. And he says, Pastor, what are you going to do to get our Sunday school that big? I took a bite. Because, here's the thing. Sunday school was incredible at one point. Today, if the point of Sunday school, right, if my goal is the Great Commission, is engaging people who don't know Jesus Christ, I cannot go to anybody remotely in my age bracket who is unchurched and say to them, hey, would you come to this class? It has people in it who have literally been in the same class together for 60 years. Would you come with me? And we'll maybe talk about Jesus. They're not doing that. Not in a million years are they going to, A, come into the church building, and B, walk into that classroom. But I could say to them, would you come to my living room? Just come to my living room and hang out with my friends. We got a group that meets. There was a time when these were perfect. They were exactly designed for our culture. But they're not anymore. Now I want you to think about this for a second. If you're going to lead your church through transformation, and if we are absolutely committed to saying we are not, Jesus did not commission us to do vacation Bible school. Jesus commissioned us to bring the gospel. If you decided today that is where we are as a church, we are committed to the commission, we are not wedded to the method, what will people in your church you included, what will you have to lose in order to gain the Great Commission?
A few people, I would say some people, you'll lose some people.
You lose some people? Okay.
People, if they don't know, they would not, no, that's not, the famous words, that's not how we do it. We've never done it that way before.
Yeah, that's everybody's favorite phrase. All right, so we might lose some people because they would say, this is the only way you can do it. What else would we lose?
Comfort.
Comfort? Comfort in,
The known.
Okay.
You're losing your place.
yeah? Okay, so some people would feel like they lost their place. What else would we lose? Yes, ma'am.
Support.
Support? What kind of support?
Well, if they're all in on Sunday school, if they're all in on Vacation Bible School, and they'll support us, but we say, we're not doing that this year. We're looking outside the box. We're going to try something new. They might back off and not be as supportive and encouraging.
Okay, so people might pull back. What else would you lose?
I would say complacency.
I'm sorry?
Complacency.
You would lose complacency? That's fair. If I come to Western Baptist Church and I say to them, hey, I realize that you all have literally been in the same class for 60 years, okay? This is how this works. The first Sunday I went in, they all said to me, we were the young adult class. Whoa, okay. 60 years, right? And we're having, this is not even hypothetical, this is true. We are having this conversation right now. We are saying there, hey guys, we don't think Sunday school is a model that's going to work in the future. We're talking about starting community groups. So if I come to this class of people that for 60 years have been in the same class together, and I say to them, you got 5 teachers, and I just cannot resource that anymore. You can have 1. We need these other teachers to engage in community groups. What is that Sunday school class going to lose?
Their identity.
They're going to lose identity. What else? Fellowship, right? This is their friends. Okay? What else? Comfort? Yeah. Yeah. We would keep going down this list, take Vacation Bible School. Church I'm at right now, they can show me pictures and say, there was a time there were hundreds of kids who came, right? And most of them were unchurched. This summer, we slaved away during the hottest week of the summer. It always is the hottest week of the summer. No matter what week. Right? We spent hours. We spent money. We built props. No joke. There is a basement in my building that is bigger than most sanctuaries, and it is filled with props. We never reuse the dumb things, but we have them. Okay, we do all this. We spend all this money, all this time. We had 12 children come. Okay. All 12 go to other churches. Okay. If we looked at that and we said to our people who love VBS, just don't think it's fulfilling the Great Commission, we need to come up with a new way to do that. What's our VBS team going to lose? Their purpose. Enthusiasm. Yeah. Their participation. Yeah. I do VBS. I don't do whatever it is you're talking about next. Whatever it is that we're talking about, if we as leaders are going to help our churches transform, we've got to wrestle with the reality that we have to lose in order to gain. Okay? Now, most leaders know that. Most of your congregants can intuit that, but none of us like it. So I want you to think about this for a second, and don't give me the names of anybody in your church. How do people in your church behave when they experience loss? Terribly.
A lot of them either leave or they stop. Like one couple's not happy with Sunday school class, they left. Another wasn't happy with the choir director, or that the church decided on, so they attend church, but they won't participate in choir anymore. They just.
So they either leave physically or they leave in terms of their willingness to participate.
Right.
Okay? How else do people behave? when they experience loss in your church?
Don't give anymore.
They don't give anymore. That's right. They tell Jesus they will not obey him. Yes. What else? Sorry, that's my biggest pet peeve. They argue. Temper tantrums.
They allow them to define them.
Okay, this loss becomes absolutely defining of them as a person. Anything else?
It divides.
Divides.
Oh, that's the other stuff, right?
Yeah, it'll create a big division. Okay. Nick, how do you react when you experience loss?
I go the opposite way and try to do more, and that's my church's criticism of me then. Try to make up the
So
more
you-
money,
you,
or
you overcompensate.
yeah, or
Okay.
I try to sing in choir and I can't sing. You know.
Okay, so if your church experiences loss, you try to fill the gap, make everybody happy,
Make everything better.
make everything better. Okay.
You gotta show them that they're wrong.
Try to show them they're wrong. There you
Make
go.
everything better.
There you go. Okay. I don't actually expect you to answer this one out loud. Though I do notice that the first question there was lots of quick answers to.
I want to heal
I'm sorry.
and move on.
You want to heal and move on. Let's just go. Let's keep going. Okay.
You know what? When I experience loss, you know what? I'm like, whoo, what's one less thing I gotta do? I'm serious. I'm like, okay.
Unless that loss is, I just lost my friends. Or I lost my purpose.
No, because usually for me, I'm doing 10,000 things.
Well, there you go. You're
Yeah, I'm just saying.
overcompensating in the
I'm
other
like,
direction.
I don't need to do it, somebody else can do it. Hey, that works for me.
Yeah,
There
but
you
the
go.
majority of people that attend church don't carry the load that some of us carry.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very true.
Yeah.
But they're still going to feel the loss of something that got taken away.
Yeah.
So I ask us these two questions because I think they're really important. They're important because we have to recognize that there's two things going on. One is how the people that we as leaders lead, experience change. And the reality is that if you take something away, right, loss causes people to grieve. Period. Every time. It's just what happens. It's okay, as a matter of fact. It's simply grief. And people express grief in all sorts of different ways. Right? Some people deny. They just pretend you did not actually take VBS away from me, and they keep planning it. Right? We call it denial, not passive aggressive. We're being nice right now. Right? Or they get very angry, or they pull away, or they get really, really sad. People experience loss and they grieve. But so do leaders. We have our own ways of reacting and responding whenever there is loss. And honestly, that's the piece of this puzzle I think we need to talk about today. Because if we're going to be transforming leaders, leaders that are absolutely committed to the Great Commission, leaders who are saying, we believe that what got us here won't get us there, but we're committed to getting there. We're committed not to Sunday school or VBS or whatever that method is. We're committed to communicating the gospel to as many people as possible. Then we have to be leaders who are willing and able to help individuals and groups, right? Help that one-on-one person and the board or the Sunday school class. Help individuals and groups experience and navigate loss in order to gain the Great Commission. And I picked those words for us really carefully, right? As leaders, part of walking your church through a transformation process is encouraging people to experience loss. And I gotta tell you, I am the exact opposite. Okay, as a leader, I am the person standing there going, we are gonna gain so much more than whatever it is you're losing. So would you please get over it? Okay? True confessions, that's me. But that's not helpful. Right? You wouldn't do that to somebody who's lost a loved one. Right? We don't look at them and say, you really need to suck it up. There's other people that you could love. Move on. We look at them and say, the most healthy thing you could do right now is name your grief. Right? Name what it is that you're losing and experience it. But we also have to help people navigate loss. And we have to help them move through loss, to be able to process what they're going through so they can get to the other side. See, some of you are leaders in the room who do the exact opposite of what I tend to do. You notice that somebody experiences loss. You have way more mercy than I do. So it hurts your heart. And you say, I'm sorry, we won't do this. Right? Both ways mean we will never actually get there. My just don't experience it means that people will leave, or that people are going to get very damaged in the process. The leader who looks at people and says, I'll never help you through it, I'm just going to try to buffer you from it, you cannot have your church grow. You can't move in a different direction because you won't be willing to let your people experience loss. Leaders, our responsibility is to help individuals and groups both experience and navigate loss. But here's the deal. We got to deal with us first. Because just like the people in the room are experiencing loss, so are leaders. You know, if you're a leader that's utterly committed to saying, we're going to the Great Commission, we are working to seeing the gospel be lived out here, well, friends, you're going to lose some things. For instance, you should probably give up wanting to have praise be spoken to you all the time. Because if you are moving your church anywhere, you're going to lose some praise. You're going to lose people saying, you're just the best thing since sliced bread. Because you're bringing challenge. If you're a leader that's leading off the map, and we're at the edge and we're keeping going, you're going to have to give up control, some feeling of competency, because you don't know where you're going. And whatever plans have been laid out, we have to learn how to let go of what we have. And that's hard to do. My underwriting understanding of this process is that I can't help you experience and navigate loss until I first experience and navigate it. The same loss. I got to deal with me so I can help you. Because I'm going to react to loss. And if I'm coming reactionary, we're not going to get anywhere. So what I want us to do today is have a conversation not around how do you actually concretely help your church experience and navigate loss. Buy this book and then make your people study it. It's called Managing Transitions by William Bridges. 25 years ago, I mean, it's been around the block for a while. It is the single best book you're going to read about leading people and groups through transitions. And this is written down on the back of that handout already. This thing's fantastic. It will tell you in really concrete terms, this is how I help people process what they're going through. But it is written from a business perspective, right? It is written like you are the boss and you show up and you do your job and you clock out at the end of the day and you go home. Pastors don't get to do that. Leaders in churches often don't get to do that because we're too connected to what Jesus is doing. If we're going to lead people through transition, we're going to have to transition the way we handle conflict, the way we process loss, so that we can help other people through it. So to do that, we're going to talk about Kairos moment. I have found the concept of a Kairos moment to be incredibly helpful in my ministry with people, helping them to process what God's doing. So we're going to define Kairos in this way. Now, let me explain the word to you, because I did go to the cemetery, also known as seminary, and I have a lot of debt, and I feel like I should have something for it, and so the fact that I know one Greek word is part of that. So chronos, right, there's two words in Greek that mean time. Chronos means it is 2:16, and you are trapped in here with me. Chronos time is just chronological, right? It's just, I ate lunch at noon. It's just what happens at a specific time. Kairos time. Kairos is something incredible. Because Kairos refers to the moment in time when the kingdom of God is at hand. Okay? Kairos is when God is near and heaven is breaking into earth. And here's the really important part about a Kairos moment. If God is near, heaven's breaking into earth, then all the resources, all of them, all the resources needed for God to do his new work are present right here, right now. If we, as are willing to experience loss in order to gain the kingdom. So when we're talking about Kairos moment, right? It's 2:15. Kairos moment is when God shows up. And you know the thing about a Kairos moment is it can be the most beautiful, wonderful moment ever, right? Where you stand back like the birth of a child is a Kairos moment. Life just sort of stops. Time stops. And you just know that God is breaking in, he's doing something new. You can have a Kairos moment in the context of your church when you stand back one day and you just watch and you have no other explanation for what is happening right before your eyes other than God is right here, right now. Kairos moments can be moments that you might have attributed, to Satan. They can be the moments that you stand back and go, this is awful. But God is present, and God's getting ready to do something new. Kairos moments, they can happen in board meetings. They can happen when you are bored out of your mind. But God is showing up. Now, maybe the best way to help us illustrate a Kairos moment it's called the Kairos Circle. And I stole this from a guy named Mike Breen. We're going to let that X up there represent the Kairos moment. This is the moment in time when God's breaking in, God's about to do something new. Now, here's what often happens when you and I realize that God is speaking, that the Lord's about to do something. We do this. We observe. Right? We sit back for a second and go, I think something's happening here. We reflect. So kind of internally, we think about what it is that we see God doing. You might take this and apply it to, how many of you are married? Good, I'm not, so I can make fun of you. You and your spouse, do you and your spouse have the same kind of fight all the time? Yeah, everybody's going, no, that never happens with us. Okay, so let's imagine that you and your spouse are having one of those fights. And you, being the better one, step back and you observe. Here we go again. You reflect. I said this, and now he's going to say that, and then it's going to come back this way, and you know in your head. You might even discuss. You might sit with your spouse and say, honey, every time you, then I, and then we, okay? Oh, I'm so glad we had this wonderful conversation and we figured it all out. And the next time that they squeeze the toothpaste wrong, what happens? We just repeat the dance, right? Okay. For most of us, anytime God breaks in and says, I want to do something new, I swear 90% of the time, we observe, we reflect, we discuss. If you are a part of a church board, you know this process. We sit at the board. We sit at the board and we say, okay, this ministry is not working anymore. We've observed it. We reflect on it. We talk about it. Well, let's table that till next month. Right? And we put it on next year's calendar and we just keep going. We get stuck. We waste a lot of kairoses. If we're going to see God do something, then we got to actually complete this circle. And this second half of the circle is about faith. Right? The second half of the circle says, God, I believe that you're doing something new and all the resources we need are right here. The first half of the circle says, I don't believe that for a moment. That's why I keep doing the same things over and over again. Second half says, God, I believe you're doing something. And Mike Breen says, if we're ever going to finish that circle, what we have to do is after we've discussed it, we need to make a plan. We got a plan to do something different, right? To plan whatever it is that God's inviting us into. To get some accountability. So I don't know about you guys, but I don't do a whole lot unless my best friend is over there going, so you remember what you promised you were going to do? I have a lot of accountability in my world. And then that last step is action, right? Actually doing something different. Now, Mike Breen, when he teaches this, he uses a slinky. Remember these things? Yeah. This is from the dollar store, so it's not called a slinky. It's called a magic spring. But Mike Breen takes his magic spring, and he'll hold it out like this, and he will say, this first loop, right, the top of this first loop, he says, that's your Kairos moment. That's when God's breaking in, and he's inviting you to do something different. And most of us, we go down the loop a little bit, and then we abort process, and we go right back up. And we are stuck there until the day that we decide to finish the circle. When we do, you get to move. to the next Kairos moment. That's what our life as a Christian ought to look like. Watching God break in and grow us and change us and transform us. That's what your church should look like. One Kairos circle after the next that moves us as we grow closer to God. So we're going to take this image of Kairos, and I want us to apply it as leaders, as transforming leaders, to apply it to ourselves around this conversation around how do we experience and navigate loss. Because as we complete the circle, and we let God transform us, that puts us in position to be able to help others to experience and navigate loss. So, let's get personal. Please don't answer this question out loud. One of the groups earlier, they tried to give me a name. Please really don't do that. Picture the person at your church with whom you find yourself engaging in conflict most frequently. Their picture, you already got it, don't you? Picture that person. What about them? Now, what characteristics about them just rub you wrong? Mr. Valley, she's written. You got him in mind? Now, as I said, I've been in Camp Hill for only 3 months, so I don't have anybody there that we engage in conflict all the time. They still think they like me. But I was in Norristown for 9 years, right? I was Julia's pastor at Norristown for 9 years. And I was there long enough to annoy people and them to bug me. There was one person in particular. I mean, from day one. If I went outside and I said, the sky is really beautiful blue today, she'd have come up beside me and said, no, it's ugly and gray. Okay. Day one. Everything I tried to do in that church, she was going to be on the other side. Even if it even if it made the most sense for her. It could have been her idea, but if I was for it, she was against it. Now, when we were together in public, we were polite. She'd come up to me and she'd say, Pastor, how are you? And in the back of my mind, I'd think, like you care. But I'm sanctified. So I would say, oh, I'm great, how are you? And we would do this lovely little polite dance in public. When we were in meetings, she was fairly benign, but she was always thwarting. Eventually, she'd pick up the telephone. And she'd call people in our church, especially people who'd been there a long time, and she would begin the conversation with them by saying, what don't you like about church? Now, that's always a fun way to start things. And they might say something like, you know, I think the curtains in the Sunday school classroom are kind of ugly. And she'd say, me too. Do you know who picked them out? Now, they've been there for 37 years. I'm not that old. Didn't matter. She'd call them together and say, what don't you like? It's the pastor's fault. Then pretty soon she started getting groups of people together for secret meetings in her living room. And she'd bring them into these secret meetings that I didn't know anything about, and she'd ask them there, what don't you like? And then she would tell them it was my fault. Then she'd start to tell them, did you know these awful things the pastor is planning on taking away? And I would think, I didn't know I was doing that. Or she'd say, did you know the pastor said this to this person? And I'd think, I haven't seen them in 3 months. I don't remember saying that. Sunday morning, this whole group of people would show up shooting daggers, and I'd think, must have been a living room meeting. I don't know what we're talking about. One point, one of those days we were having a polite conversation. She looked at me and she said, you know what, Pastor? I know the way you think. And I thought something not very polite. And she said, you know why I know that? No, why? She said, because we're a lot alike. Oh. Amen, right? Whew. Because we were in church, I bit my tongue. But I thought, okay, sure we are. And I walked away, angry as anybody could ever be. About a year later, a woman who's a really good friend of mine, and who would consider herself a friend of this other woman as well. I was talking to her about whatever living room meeting had just happened. And she said, you know what, Pastor, you know why I think you two have a hard time with each other? I said, why? She said, I think you're a lot alike. And I hit her. We're still friends, despite that comment. But you know what? That for me was the Kairos moment. Because I realized we were a lot alike. You know, she's a strong leader and I'm a strong leader. She likes to have control. I like to have control. We both had a very clear vision for the church. They were just diametrically opposed. But even worse than that, we were both doing the same thing. You know, I realized that day that what would happen every time she and I got into conflict, which was regular, I would observe the conflict, I would reflect on it, and then I'd call up a friend. And I would discuss her. I'd discuss what she was doing and what I didn't like her doing. Now the difference is I didn't have to make up anything. But I wasn't doing anything any different. And I would discuss this person and how much I couldn't take it anymore, and she needed to change, and she better change soon. And then I'd zip right back up there. And we would dance the same dance. A couple years ago, the Lord convicted me, though, that if change was going to take place in our church, it had to start with me, not with her. And that's the first Kairos moment, friends. It's about you. That conflict that you're engaged in with that person who just drives you up the wall, it's not about them. It's about you. Now, 90% of the time, the characteristics of another person that we just cannot stand, ask your loved one. Let them stand way far back. But ask your loved one, am I at all like that? My guess is yes. Now, that woman was doing things that were incredibly, incredibly wrong. But you know what? I spent 7 years talking about how she needed to change, and the only person in that scenario who could change, well, who would change, was me. It's about you. The conflict that we're engaging in is 90% of the time about us. Actually, it's 100% of the time about us. Because 100% of the time, God's desiring to do something in us. With that woman, what I ended up doing was saying, Holy Spirit, what do you want to do in me? I've discussed her ad nauseum. What do you want to do that's going to bring change? And as I began to pray about it, the Lord said, well, you're doing the same thing she is. You're just talking behind her back. So I called her up. And we sat down. Now I had witnesses. But we sat down so that I could look her square in the eye and say, I don't trust you and you don't trust me, but we can't keep doing this. I need you to meet with me on a regular basis and stop talking behind my back, start talking to my face. I'll talk to you. And we did that. Now I wish I could tell you that she changed. She didn't. But the church did. That church changed a lot. You know why? Because me having the same dance with her made the whole church have the same dance. I had people listening to me and people listening to her. And when I said, no, we're not going to do this anymore, I want God to change me. God changed the church. Leader, whatever it is that person that you're in conflict with, it's about you. And if you're going to finish the circle, then you need to ask that question. Holy Spirit, what are you desiring to do in me in this area of loss? Next one. I want you to think about this set of questions. What is the most effusive, most over-the-top praise that you have remembered receiving as a leader? And who gave it to you? That's hopefully a fun one. Most over-the-top person just praises you the most. Second question. What's the most cutting criticism you've received as a leader? And who gave it to you? Sadly, I bet that one comes faster. Anybody, they were the same person? When I was in Norristown, I'd say for the first 2-3 years, there's this little old lady. Her name is Miss Millie. She's about yay tall. And Miss Millie, she's 90 now, so she would have been in her early 80s. And every time I saw Miss Millie for the first 2 or 3 years, she'd come over, she'd give me a big hug. And she would say, Pastor, you are the best pastor we've ever had. No. And she'd come grab me and she would say, I just hope nobody steals you. I've never figured out, is there a big market for like kidnapping pastors? Because Miss Millie was terrified. Right? She'd come up every time I saw her. Big hug. Oh, she just loved me so much. I was the best thing in the whole wide world. Now, I'm not totally stupid. Close. Not totally. So I was smart enough to look at that and go, this is a bit over the top. I mean, we got to the point where that woman was praising me for breathing. I was like, I didn't have to do nothing. But I'll be honest, I liked it. I mean, Miss Millie is a leader in that church. So when she came over and gave me big hugs, said I was the best thing since sliced bread, so did her whole group of cronies, right? They'd come, oh, we just love you. Well, about that time, the church started to change. About that time, some new people started coming to church. And at first, I got hugs for that. You know, Miss Millie was real excited. New people coming to church, she's so excited about this. But then more of them came. And the church began to grow, and the church began to change. And would you know it, that one of those people that came to church, friends, they wanted to help Miss Millie make snacks at Vacation Bible School. And I mean to tell you, it was like the whole world was going to end. But I wouldn't tell that other person they couldn't help. Miss Millie stopped telling me she liked me. She went silent for a while. And as things kept growing and the church kept changing, eventually Miss Millie stopped coming altogether and started instead lobbing some really nasty criticisms, some of which were based in reality. We went all directions. You know what? In that same time period, Miss Millie's husband got dementia. And Miss Millie became his primary caregiver. She used to say to me, I took vows for better or for worse, not for better or for nurse. And she'd say that with a smile on her face, but it wasn't a joke to her. By the time that Miss Millie was leaving the church, her husband died. And she was just broken. You know what? Here's Kairos number 2. It's not about you. The conflict you're engaged with somebody else, friends, it's about you. It's about what the Holy Spirit is inviting you to receive from Him to be transformed. But oftentimes, that over-the-top praise and those nasty, cutting criticisms, they are not about you. Leaders, sometimes we really got to let this one sink in. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes people criticize me is 100% about me because they're 100% right. Sometimes it has nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with where they're at. Now, if you're a pastor here, you know that if somebody in your congregation had a great relationship with your dad, then they're going to love Pastor Randy. If they had a really messed up relationship with their mom, I'm in big trouble. If somebody is just happy about what they see the Lord doing in their life, pastor, they probably gonna love you. If they're angry with God, you are much easier to get at. It's not about you. And if we're gonna lead people through transformation, we're gonna have to hold on to that truth. The only way that we're gonna make the whole circle is if we are able to say, this really isn't about me. Because you know what happens most of the time? People will come to us and they've given us praise and they're so excited about what's going, and we observe their praise, we reflect on it, we discuss it, and we decide what we're doing is great. And if God invites us to change, we won't touch it. Or people will come and they will criticize. Let's say we're taking Sunday school away and they're going to come say, Pastor, you're the worst thing we have ever seen. It's not about you. It's about what's going on deeper in their lives. And if we're able to figure that out, then we won't abort what God is doing. Actually, we'll start asking a much better question, which is not, why are you angry or why are you happy? It is, what does this person need? What do they need Jesus to be? Leader, do you know how much that changes the conversation at your next board meeting? Now, you walk into the board meeting and people say, man, Miss Millie's really upset, Pastor. Yep, she sure is. She's really upset. So you know what? We need to slow down, or we need to stop, or we need to not continue to pursue what we've sensed God's inviting us in to do. Do you know how things change when you look back at people and you say, actually, what do you think Miss Millie needs from Jesus? What does she need Jesus to be? Does she need Jesus to be her security? Does she need Jesus to be the one who is intimate in her life? Does she need Jesus to be her healer? What does she need him to be that she's trying to get me to be? Or she's trying to get Sunday school to be? Because none of us can. If we're able to process that on our own, it is not about me. It's about, what does this person need Jesus? We can help them experience and navigate their loss. Last one. This comes from a book called Thriving Through Ministry Conflict by James Osterhaus. In this book, the first half of this book is a parable. And in his parable, James talks about, he's talking about a church leader walking their church through transformation. And in the parable, in the story he tells, which is just is corny as can be, but he's got some good stuff in there. As he walks through this parable, he talks about how every person has a trigger. Right? He calls them themes. But it's the trigger that every single one of us, and so leader, that means you got this button that you can help people experience loss, you can help them walk through this change and this transformation until they touch the magic button. And when they touch that button, all bets are off. Right? They touch this button, and for some of us, it makes us just explode. We get angry, we get defensive, which, by the way, will make it really difficult to lead people through change. Or we retreat, and we say, oh, if you're going to touch that button, then we can't do this. We can't cross the Rocky Mountains together. We can't go to the Great Commission. So he says that every one of us has one main trigger. Now, I would argue as I look at this list that I got like 3. But let's say there's one, and he breaks it down into these 4 categories. So I'm going to read these for us, and as we're reading it, I want you to be thinking, what's your main trigger? What's the button? If people press this, it sends you flying. So the first one is survival. Survival says that your description of yourself is, I've got to take care of me, nobody else will. Okay? A person for whom survival is your trigger, some positive traits: you are competent, you are self-reliant, and you are responsible. Because nobody else is going to take care of you. The negative parts of that is you're going to lack ability to trust others and be wary, have little interest in anything unless there's practical benefit to you, and become angry and panicky whenever you feel like your survival is being threatened. The second trigger is acceptance. All right, so for the person who acceptance is your main theme, then your thought process is, I'm going to do anything to be loved, anything to be accepted. I just want to please people. Folks for whom acceptance is your trigger, you have a heart for serving others, you're attentive to the needs and feelings of others. But you're also overly compliant and self-effacing, tend to be rescuers, you become angry and you carry grudges when you feel rejected, and I would add to that, when you feel replaced. Control. Your self-description is, because the world's threatening, I am safe only when I'm in control of situations and other people. People for whom control is a trigger, you've got strong leadership qualities, you're vigilant, you're highly organized, and you have high expectations of yourself. You're also walled off emotionally from others, can be bossy, directive, rigid, and demanding, can become anxious and angry whenever control is threatened. And the fourth one is competence. Right, so the person for whom competence is your trigger, kind of the tape that runs in the back of your mind is, I'm loved only on the basis of my performance, which is never good enough, which means I'm never loved. Positive traits for the person for whom competence is a trigger: you're high achievers and you work hard to achieve great performances. You're also never satisfied, you have a hard time receiving well from others, and you're going to become defensive and angry when your competence gets questioned. Okay? Survival, acceptance, control, confidence. Which one of those 4 best describes you, Ellen? And I won't ask you to tell us. I can tell you with 110% certainty that mine is competency. Now, I like to be in control, and I like to be liked. So I like the Miss Millies of the world. But I tell you what, I will trade all that in as long as I feel competent. And I think that you think I'm competent. That's my button. When I start to feel like, man, I am just not competent at what I am doing, it's like you just hit the panic button for me. And all of a sudden, I got to back off real fast, real in a hurry. And I either try to work so hard at making myself seem competent that I mess everything up because I get defensive. Or I stop it. I just say, we can't do this because I don't know what we're doing. Whatever your one is, your number one is, here's Kairos number 3. It's your idol. Now, when we talk about idols, you know what I mean, right? I don't mean the cute little ceramic cat or whatever they find, they dig up somewhere in archaeological digs. Idols are the things that you'll give up everything for. An idol is the altar at which we worship. And for some of us, for all of us, we've got them. The question is, which one's yours? And the reason why conflict and loss is this Kairos moment, is this moment when God's breaking in, is because God's breaking in to say, I'd like to break this cycle. And God's desire is that He be the one and only thing that we give up everything for. So if we're going to finish the circle, right, we're going to complete that Kairos moment, we're going to have to start to change. We're going to start changing the things we hear in our minds. So that resource, that last question for us, is what is the Father's word for you in place of this idol? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, competency is mine, right? 110%. Competency is mine. And that means that in the back of my head, there is always a tape that says, I am loved, and I am valued, and I have worth, based strictly on my performance. Period. That's what I think. And as long as that's what I think, then anytime I get into a place where people are questioning my competency or my performance, or I'm the one questioning it, I can't help them process their own loss. I'm too busy trying to make me look good. I gotta change this. You know, the word that my Father has for me is that my value does not come through my performance, right? My value comes because I am loved by Jesus Christ. That when my Father speaks to me, He says, Kelly, you're my daughter, and I love you. And as I get that to become the tape that plays in the back of my mind, I can help individuals and groups process through loss as we're making transformation. You know, I'll be honest with you, friends, I know how to run a Sunday school. I know how to buy curriculum from Judson Press. It's not complicated. I don't have a clue how to get my congregation to move towards community groups, to small groups that are going to meet in their homes. I am incompetent when that comes down to it. And I bet that come January, when we try to launch those suckers, I bet we mess it up. But I'm loved by Jesus, completely 100%. And that means I can help them walk through this process. Because it's not about me. It's about what He's doing. We look at these 3 points. These points that are meant to help us process our own experience and navigation of loss so we can help other people to do it. They come down to just those 3 things, right? It's about you. Whatever conflict you're in, it's about you. So Holy Spirit, what are you desiring to do in me in this place of loss? It is not about you. The praise and the criticism that people are giving you is because they're asking you to be Jesus. It's not about you. So finishing that circle is saying, Jesus, what does this person need you to be? And then coming alongside them in that way. And then number 3, it's your idol. Whatever that button is, that trigger is. And that's the thing you'll lay it all down for. And so saying, Father, what's the new word that you want to speak into my life? before we workshop these a little bit, any questions about these 3 kairos? Questions we need to answer. Good, that's what I want. So here's what I want you to do. For the next about 10 minutes, I want you to get in groups of 2 or 3 people around your table. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to just share with each other from these, which one of these 3 kairoses is most significant for you right now in your ministry context. And we've only got 10 minutes. So hear this in love. Please do not share the 250-year history of your church. It's really not relevant. Right now, for you, which one of these kairos is most significant? I'm going to ask you to share that with each other so that together you can process. So if you're saying, hey, what's most important to me right now is that it is about me. If I'm sharing that with Cheryl, then I need Cheryl to say back to me, so what do you think the Holy Spirit's doing? How do you want him to grow? Let's practice walking through these kairoses together, right? Groups of 2 or 3, what's most significant in your context, helping each other to allow the Lord to speak into them. Okay?
Is that the end?
Nice to meet you.